man-to-man, one-on-one coverage because the safety rolls to Jefferson's side.
This guy's like becoming like a circus act. Like he could do this.
Von Rock caught a ball with his thighs. We didn't even talk about that.
It was more of with his ass.
If he throws a good ball, this is a running, catching touchdown untouched.
To become who we want to be as individuals, and at the end of the day, that's going to help us be a successful offense.
Like, KP does like these flips after every win. Now I'm like just waiting for him to do his flips.
You can tune in anywhere that you guys follow us on social media.
Shout out to Jalen Ramsey. He sucks.
Welcome to the Practice Squad podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host Mark. We are 3-4 weeks away from the NFL draft. It's probably
coming up,
the best time of the off season. It's a really, really good time. So I'm stoked for it. That's pretty much going to be this entire episode, as we got draft talk for you guys. So primarily what we got going on is we're going to talk about our top offensive prospects, and we have to be toxic too. So we have a couple overhyped offensive draft prospects as well. We're going to talk a little bit about Masters, a little bit about the outcome of NCAA finals. Both women's and men's, and that's pretty much it for the episode. Mark, how you been, dude? You watch any movies?
I'm feeling right here. Do you hear this? Full draft day. That's how I'm feeling right now.
Sounds fantastic.
This is a draft episode, man. I'm good. I watched the Final Four game, both games. Watched the championship game. Thought the games actually they got better. A lot more looks, a lot more watches on those games actually compared to like some of the blue blood matchups we've seen in the past few years, which surprised some people. But people just like to see the Cinderella story. They like to see good basketball, and sometimes those teams that you didn't expect to get there kind of draw more of a fan base as the season goes on. But we got a game winner in the first game, which was one of the better shots we've seen in a Final Four. Then UConn just showed their dominance.
Well, yeah, UConn beat just about every team by double digits, which is crazy. I think they might have beat every team by double digits. They were dominant. Happy that I chose them to go to the finals in my bracket. Ended up winning my work bracket, so I was stoked about that. Won a little bit of cash, and it was fun watching UConn, pretty much just dominate that entire game.
Do you think they're the most dominant March Madness team, John, that you can remember seeing?
That I can remember seeing, because they didn't even come close to losing really at any point in the tournament.
The Villanova team, I posted a short on this. The Villanova team a few years ago averaged like a 17 per game margin of victory, and they were considered one of the better teams, right? They had an awesome run, but UConn won by higher average points per game than that team. So I think it was above 20 points per game.
That's so crazy. And then obviously, LSU, Iowa, the big drama there is obviously Caitlin Clark is like essentially the best female basketball player prospect. Yeah. And
she's unbelievable.
Them losing to LSU, and then what was her name? Angel Reese, I think is what the drama's
taunting.
Around. Yeah. And look, this is what I got to say, because people are even saying like, oh, it was trashy for her to do that. And other people are saying, oh, that she was just mocking Caitlin and stuff like that. I'll just draw the line and say this is sports, and last time I checked, trash talk is allowed during sports. Like, if you're playing at the college NFL level, that happens all the time. They're competitors. Yeah. There's adrenaline going through their body. They're on the biggest stage of probably their careers in that moment. So, let that shit fly. Like, the fact that was in the headline pissed me off.
My take on it is slightly different. I have no problem with her taunting Caitlin Clark, because Caitlin Clark had done it in previous games. She's actually done it in more than just the previous game against Louisville. My problem was the timing of when Angel Reese chose to do it, and she did it in a much more taunting, disrespectful way than Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark did it as she walked by somebody. It was very subtle. It was still kind of a jerk move, right? Whatever. I'm not going to hate on taunting. I was never a trash talker. That wasn't really my thing. But if that's your thing, it's fine. She seems to be that. Angel Reese seems to be that. That's great. It's good for basketball. It's good to see that. People want to watch that. But when you, after winning a national championship, instead of celebrating, the first thing you want to do is go find her, not only taunt her, but continue to follow her around the court as she leaves. And, she's obviously upset. She just lost the national championship game. And it's not like it was a close game at that point either. Like, that, I think, was over the top. and it was just more about making it about me compared to go celebrate with your team. You just won a national championship, you know?
Sure.
So Angel Reese's was a little bit different than Caitlin Clark's. I'm not going to make
That's a fair take. She was definitely more excessive about it.
It was a little bit over the top.
Caitlin Clark also opened the door, you know, that was something that she does. And she didn't seem to mind it after.
No, and she's come out and said she has no problem with it.
Yeah.
She said that today in an interview. She says, listen, Angel, you know, I have no problem with what she did. They earned every right to talk trash. They beat us and basically said that she's got no problem with it. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think it got blown out of proportion, but worth talking about. Definitely interesting.
Definitely. And then, you know, the other, I guess, you know, non-related sports or, you know, football topic rather is the Masters coming up. I said to Mark before the show, yeah, I love the Masters. It's like my favorite sport to just fall asleep to, just kind of chill out, watch some golf. And like, I don't even mean that in an offensive way. It's just relaxing. The commentators' voices are nice and smooth.
It's beautiful.
And monotone. It's just great. You're just chilling out.
You got the Masters voices, right? That's beautiful. You got the Masters sound, right? That music starts playing, right? And it comes up with that logo, that beautiful logo. And we've said it in recent episodes. We talked about some of the best tournaments or, you know, championships in sports. March Madness, we just concluded, I think is probably the best tournament. It's the best, most organized. It draws the most fans that aren't typical college basketball fans. Everybody watches. Everybody fills out a bracket. And it's just, you know, it does a great job of drawing people that aren't typically watching it. Golf, the Masters, same thing. People that don't watch golf or don't golf, they'll tune in for the Masters every now and then. They'll follow it a little bit. It's awesome, dude. I think it's probably the second best tournament style thing we have in sports in America. So got to tip my hat off to the Masters. I love watching it. It's fun to bet on too, because like the odds are so crazy because just there's one winner. So, and you never know, right, who it's going to be. You know, you have Tiger every year. Like everyone thinks he's got a chance. A bunch of money goes on him, and you just never know when he's going to somehow pull it off. Like he just never.
Okay, and this is my fault for not tracking this. How has his injury recovery been? I know he's been back at it, but like,
dude, you can never count him out. I think he's going to play. He will always say that he thinks he can compete and win. I mean, the dude came off of one of the worst injuries. I mean, he almost died. Comes back the next Masters and wins the damn thing. People thought he would never golf again. And in the next Masters wins. Are you kidding me? Like you can never count him out ever.
Yeah, it's unreal. He truly is and I mean he gets his proper respect for sure, but he truly
I saw a funny thing too, John, with the Masters, and this is you know, you and I both golf a little bit, far below average of, you know, what a player should be in golf. They said what yardage, okay, per hole. So you can start from the same yardage on every hole, would you need to start at to win the Masters against the professionals? Would you have to start on the green? Or could you start from 20 yards off the green and beat everybody?
Oh, that's tough. Because I would say my best like attribute as a golfer is probably my drive, right? But I'd obviously get smoked.
But that ain't going to help you against those guys.
So honestly, I would say, I'd probably have to start on the green. And
that's fair, dude. Because you'll to be honest, I don't think people realize how hard the greens are. Like, they make it look easy, but you and I would probably putt 10 times. On average.
Yeah, they're like lightning. They're so short, and the ball's just.
So, I think we would have to start on the green, and we still would probably not finish in the top 100. Seriously, like I actually think that. No, like I'm actually a pretty good putter. Right. Like it's probably the strongest part of my game is putting, and it doesn't matter because I would have no chance on those greens.
Yeah,
no chance.
Okay. Did you watch any movies? Anything you want to cover in the movie department before we get on to football stuff?
Yeah, I did actually. It was a rewatch, but the first time I watched it, I was like so confused I had to rewatch it again. Tenet. You seen it?
I have not seen it, but I heard it's pretty good, so I might have to go check it out.
I couldn't really begin to explain to you what happens in the movie. All I could really explain to you is it's another Christopher Nolan movie. It's better than Memento, which was the other one that I did not have good things to say about. You have to watch it more than once. It's kind of like Inception, but even more confusing. And Tenet, I'll say the title has something to do with the movie in terms of like Tenet is spelled the same way forwards and backwards. So like you kind of have to use that as you're watching the movie to like try to figure out what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it's good or bad. Honestly, it's like I liked watching it. It's a good watch, but I could not tell you if it's like good or bad. It's so confusing.
I also watched a movie, and it's probably my most rewatched movie ever. So I got together with my my former classmates and watched Revenge of the Sith over again. But what we did was play a drinking game for Revenge of the Sith. And the three things was anytime there was a meme that showed up in the movie, take a drink. Okay. Anytime a new lightsaber fight started, you had to take a drink. And then this was the fun one, is anytime that you could repeat a line verbatim as it was being said, you got to pick somebody else to take a drink. If multiple people repeated the same line, everybody had to take one.
Your nerd ass probably did that the entire movie.
Oh, I was smoking people. Yeah, it wasn't even close.
Want to hear something crazy? Is I've never watched any of the Star Wars.
Yeah, that's again. So first of all, you're saying Pulp Fiction's not that good of a movie, and now you're saying that you haven't.
It was that good. I think it's overrated. I think it's overrated.
Yeah, whatever, dude. So that's.
I feel like it's too late, John. I feel like it's too late for me to watch Star Wars.
No, just watch like the first 3 that George Lucas actually made and wrote. And then, like, if you want to watch the other shit, go for it. But like those core first 6 movies are really the important ones.
Well, you're saying first 3, first 6, first 3.
Well, that's a lot. First 6, the first 2 trilogies that George Lucas made.
Sheesh. What do I got? Like 40 hours of movie watch time between the 6 of those?
Yeah. I mean, it's like 20 hours probably.
Yeah, maybe.
Dude, like they're some of the most iconic movies of all time.
Oh, I know, iconic. I don't get what all the hype's about, what all the fuss is about.
Well, you're right, because you haven't seen it. So how could you?
I don't know. That's true. Good point. I also didn't watch the Hunger Games till last week. So
yeah, so you're just a little bit late on the movies, and then you had the audacity to call Pulp Fiction overrated. So
yeah, but I've seen that movie. It's overrated.
Whatever, man. What other Tarantino have you seen? Like Inglourious Basterds, Django Unchained. Okay,
and they're all better than Pulp Fiction in my mind.
Slow down, but I would agree that it's not his best.
Django Unchained, I think, is his best.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I think Inglourious Basterds is his second best. I did not like what's the new one with Margot Robbie and Leo and
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Didn't love that one.
How did you not like that one?
I didn't not like it. I just thought, like, what the hell's going on here? Like, what's the plot?
Yeah, for like you're 2.5 hours into the movie and you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, so that goes down.
Oh, man. That's like what makes that movie so great.
Name some other ones. I've seen more, dude. The Hateful Eight.
Kill Bill.
Kill Bill up there.
Amazing. So good.
Kill Bill might be... Kill Bill I'll put at number 2. The Kill Bills, I'll put those below Django. Mm-hmm. And then I'll do Inglourious Basterds. Pulp Fiction is down there. And below Pulp Fiction is the new one, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I have not seen Reservoir Dogs.
That one's good, but it's his first one, so like it's a little raw overall. What is it? Is it Jackie Robinson? No, it's what is it called?
In which one?
Jackie Brown. That one's okay.
Haven't seen that one.
It's people say it's like his worst like character writing out of all of his movies, so it makes it like overall a weaker movie because I think like him having really interesting and like strong characters.
They're saying he's gonna make. They're saying, I guess the rumors he'll make one more.
He's got one more, and I'm hoping it's like a grand finale. So
it's got to be, dude. I mean, he's had some amazing movies.
So before we get into our draft prospects, I did send this to you on Twitter, and I'm going to go ahead and screen share here. So I, as Mark knows, spend way too much time doing mock drafts. I probably do a mock draft a day for the Lions. And this one I just thought was pretty interesting. So what happened here was the Lions traded back for with Jacksonville to take their 24th overall pick rather than 18 and then gain another second-round pick. So they'd have 3 picks in the second round. Obviously, there would have to be a very particular specific situation where Jacksonville pretty much thought that the Lions were going to take a player they wanted at 18 for this to happen. But I looked at this and I'm like, okay, so immediately our interior defensive line's disgusting, right? Like just absolutely absurd. I think what happened was somebody traded up with Arizona to get one of the quarterbacks. You had 4 quarterbacks. Seattle took Will Anderson. Jalen Carter was who was left, right? Elijah Cansey, obviously, who's a more undersized. He's not like a nose tackle. He's more of just like a standard like 3 technique D tackle. So that's complementing Carter. We have a lot of guys that can play inside too, like Buggs and McNeil and stuff like that. So a lot of versatility, a lot of depth there. Then we got Clark Phillips, who, Mark, if I remember correctly, is probably your favorite like day 2 cornerback prospect.
Yeah, I like him. I like him up there with like some of the. I think he's one of the best corner prospects in the draft, but he's undersized, so he's kind of getting underrated.
Steve Avila, who is addressing our offensive guard problem. I personally think he's the best guard in this draft. There's one other guard that you can potentially contest that with, but I think he's the best. Hendon Hooker as our backup quarterback. And you got to grab Tank Bigsby, right? Get a little bit more help on the running back situation. Dude's a stud. Also has some pretty good hands overall. Pretty similar profile to Montgomery and Swift, if I'm not lying to you, but like still just a solid running back in my opinion.
John, I think at this point, it's probably. I mean, I'd be surprised if the Lions don't move some of their picks.
I would say it's much more likely than not that we either
move up or back.
Yeah, we either shoot for 3 to get Anderson, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Or we trade back and we load up on 2nd and 3rd round picks.
That's what you and I have been saying for months now, dude. I mean, since we even looked at the draft. Like, we look at, especially after free agencies got going and we kind of saw what we did with the secondary, there's absolutely no reason why you don't move up to get Will Anderson or move back to get more value picks.
And there's just nothing interesting.
It's a no-brainer.
At 6. Like there's nobody worth grabbing.
There's a huge drop off. There's a huge drop off after those first, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, and then the quarterbacks.
I would be pissed if we took this guy at 6, but I would be too. I just gotta say though, like this guy screams Dan Campbell to me. It's Devin Witherspoon.
He's an aggressive.
He's just a ball hawk, dude, and he tackles hard as shit. Like, I almost feel like,
if we take a guy at 6, though, dude, that's a defensive back.
No, I'd be upset about it. Don't get me wrong, but just because of position value, though. But his value at his position, like,
is good.
He's a stud. He's a damn good player. So those are my 2 stupid Lions things that I'm going to talk about just while I'm out here, scheming stuff that's probably not going to happen. But that's what draft season's for, right? We sit around and
it's all hypothetical. That's why John and I have cooked up. We're excited for this episode because we're going to do a lot of draft. I mean, you've pretty much heard everything other than draft. The rest from here on out is going to be draft talk. We're going to focus on the offensive side of the ball in this episode, and we're going to go defense next week in next week's episode. So what we're going to do is we have quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, tight ends, O-line. And what we've kind of done is we've picked our top 2 or 3 guys at every position. We've picked kind of a sleeper guy at every position. And then we've picked a guy we think might be a little bit overhyped or overrated at every position. And we're going to kind of break down those lists, why we have guys where we have them, and then maybe like a potential good fit for them. So, John, you want to start with offensive line, considering you are a former offensive lineman?
Yeah, and I'm going to follow that up with I have no clue what's going on when it comes to evaluating offensive linemen to take that next step. And
it's a hard scout.
Yeah, and the reason there's a few reasons why. So I at least have enough offensive line knowledge to kind of tell you why. One, they get moved around a lot when they make that jump to the NFL because it, probably contrary to popular belief, like, playing left tackle and playing right tackle and then playing interior offensive line are 3 kind of very different positions. And like some of these guys, they might be undersized for a tackle, so they have to move into the interior offensive line. Some of them that they're getting drafted just for their size. Some of them it's because of the fact that they are versatile and they can play anywhere on the line. Like there's a lot of things that go into it. And so for that reason, I didn't really pick anybody that I thought was overrated because frankly, I don't think my offensive line scouting is good enough. And this is honestly a very generic list for the most part. Number 1's Paris Johnson. Number 2 is Broderick Jones. Number 3 is Darnell Wright. And then my sleepers are Steve Avila and Chandler Zavala, who are probably the 2 best interior offensive line picks, but they're very versatile. And that's why I thought both of them would kind of be, because you could play those guys at center. You can move them around a bit. They're pretty damn athletic for their size. So that's kind of where I'm at. So it's pretty much like, okay, the 3 guys that are probably going to come off the board is a starting instant left tackle. And then, your interior offensive line guys that are pretty diverse and I think are going to be day 1 starters as well. In fact, I'd like to see the Lions target either of those guards in the 2nd or 3rd round if they're there. So
it's definitely a need, for Detroit. I agree with you. I think this is probably on the offensive side of the ball, the hardest position to scout, year to year because You have some guys that are clear cut, like gonna make the transition to the NFL well, right? Then you have some guys that may move from tackle to guard, from guard to center, from center, like, and that stuff is really hard to predict because it doesn't always work for those guys, right? They might struggle at a different position. Some guys go from left tackle to right tackle. Like, it's really hard.
And that alone is a much harder transition than people think it is. Like,
it's
really
incredibly tough.
Yeah.
It's similar enough to like trying to shoot a basketball with your left hand compared to your right hand. I mean, for these guys, like, because if you're trying to, and I'm not joking, that first step is literally, you're so used to it, the way that you've done it for 4 years in college. And if you don't have any experience going the other side, it is literally like trying to, golf the other way.
Right.
Like, it's very hard if anyone's never tried to do that. So, it's a really hard comparison. It's hard to predict how these guys will translate to the next level. Not to mention what we've seen in recent years, a lot of these smaller schools, North Dakota State, some Division II schools, some MAC schools, have these linemen coming out that are getting drafted higher, right? Because of, potential, even though their competition might not be as good as some of these guys you see at Ohio State, Michigan, Bama,
their physical
Georgia.
Attributes might be there,
right?
Things like that. I mean,
so those guys are hard to scout. I mean, they're hard to scout because they don't play against LSU and Auburn and Wisconsin and all these other, tough defensive lines and linebacker groups. So a lot of those guys have been going high. I mean, you saw the Patriots draft a guy in the first round that Sean McVay was laughing.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, they were laughing at him. Like, we had him as like a fourth.
I actually think he turned out to be pretty solid.
Of course he did. Yeah. I mean, the Patriots rarely miss on guys like that. They might miss on receivers. They can't draft a receiver to save their life. But, so it's hard to predict. So I have, similar to Johnny, Paris Johnson out of Ohio State. I think he's the safest pick in the draft. Totally. Roderick Jones out of Georgia, another safe pick. And then another Ohio State guy, DeJuan Jones. The Jones is there. I think all three of those guys pretty safe. Okay. DeJuan Jones, some question marks, but I think his upside is also higher than both these two guys. And then my my sleeper out of Minnesota, another Big Ten guy, just partially because his name's awesome. It's an offensive line name, John Michael Schmitz. I think he's going to to a guy that translates well.
That is an offensive line name.
Offensive line name right there. But he's a sleeper. They have him, I think, as like a day 2 guy, maybe day 3. But I think that he's going to translate well. I think he's going to fit in with whatever team he gets put on.
Right. So, and I mean, that's a guy
I don't have an
versatility, right? Like, he's a center. They're probably going to bump him over to guard or something like that. Like,
that's what I'm saying. And, my draft comparison to him would be like Lindenbaum, right? Who's had an awesome start to his career with the Ravens out of Iowa. He has the potential, I think, to be that good. He just hasn't shown it yet. You know what I mean? So that's why I have him there. And I don't have an overhyped guy because, again, there's probably a lot of them. And it's hard. It's too hard to predict. Too many underrated, too many overrated.
If this was last year's draft, I would have said Trevor Penning, because same thing. Like the New Orleans Saints drafted him purely off of his size and potential. His technique was sloppy as shit, and he gets super frustrated super easily when guys are beating him. And playing tackle is a mental game, man. Like, you're going against those edge rushers, and you do let up a sack.
One of the hardest things.
Yeah,
it's one of the hardest things. I mean, you're going against freaks, man, all the time. And another thing too, I'll say why it's a hard position to scout is because I don't think there's a position besides quarterback that matters more about studying their mental and how aggressive they can be, how smart they are, how they can communicate checks. And you have to be mentally tough to play that position because you will lose, right? And it's hard to measure that, right? Because a lot of these guys have been the best player on their team since they were 14 years old, and now they're going against guys that are better than them consistently on the other side of the ball.
And people say the hardest position in football is playing, cornerback, because of the fact that if you get beat over top, you just sit there and you look like an idiot.
Everyone sees it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would argue it's even worse being a tackle and getting beat for a sack, because not only getting beat over top, it's you're sprinting trying to get back to that guy. If you let up a sack, you're just standing there like a
watching
dumbass.
It like a spectator.
While your quarterback gets absolutely murdered,
waiting for a fumble to happen, and then you get your chance to scoop and score.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, it's the most helpless thing ever. And then, you got to let up next play. It's whose job is it where you have to go up against the best athletes in the world, and your tolerance for failure is 0. You're not allowed to mess up once.
No, you got to be a badass. You got to be an absolute badass to play offensive line in the college level, and then in the NFL, it's a whole different monster. That's why it's so hard.
I'm ready to sign Penei Sewell to like a 10-year contract. Like, let's just rip the Band-Aid off now. Let's give this guy his bag. Salary cap's only going to keep going up. It just makes more sense to sign him until he's retired. Like, he's a stud. I think
He's a
2
franchise
sacks.
player. Franchise player.
Incredible. He's just incredible. He's an absolute stud. So that's what I got to say about that. Moving on to tight end. Mark, you go first since I went first on the O-line.
Okay. Yeah, so tight end, absolutely loaded tight end draft class. Me and John were talking about this before we went live here. Loaded draft class at tight end. One of the more loaded classes I can remember at this position. I would say this might even be the strongest position in this year's draft overall. That, or I would say maybe defensive back. Really strong class. I have kind of a different tight end ranking than most of the larger media draft analysts. I have Darnell Washington as my number 1 prospect out of Georgia. I just, the potential there, he was behind the best tight end in the country, at Georgia. So he didn't get a ton of opportunities to show what he can do. You saw this guy when he did get his opportunities, it's all there, man. I mean, we're looking at like the next Kelsey potential, Gronkowski level. He could be that good, and he can block well. He's physical like George Kittle is. He catches the ball. You see his frame, you see his athleticism, you see the potential that he's flashed at Georgia. And again, the guy ahead of him is literally probably the best tight end prospect we've ever seen. So it's hard to compare, but I think he's the best tight end in the draft. You got Sam Laporta out of Iowa, who I have my number 2 prospect. A lot of guys have Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer ahead of him and ahead of Darnell Washington. I have those as like my 3-4, or 3A, 3B. Couldn't really decide between the two of them. They're very similar players. Michael Mayer is getting more hype, but I think Dalton Kincaid is probably better. He's just not getting as much hype because he's out of Utah compared to Notre Dame. But Sam Laporta out of Iowa, I think, is sneaky athletic at that position. Again, Iowa tight end U. They've put out, you don't have to question Iowa and their ability to develop tight ends. And he had enough production to definitely draw, day 2 drafts. I think Darnell Washington, we might see him go in the first round. And the only other guy you might see go in the first round because everyone has him there is Michael Mayer, right? Who I have a little bit overrated. I'm not going to say, he's overrated, but he's my overrated guy, even though he's just the 3rd or 4th best tight end instead of the 1st. And then my sleeper would be Josh Weiler out of Cincinnati. Another sneaky athletic tight end that has the potential to go in. He's a pass catching guy. I would draw his comparison is like to Tyler Conklin, right? Who we've had on the show. He's not known for like his dominant blocking. He's definitely good enough to block in space. Similar how the Jets use Conklin and how they're going to use Alan Lazard and guys like that. Josh, he's got that athleticism, is kind of almost like a tight end, almost like a power forward basketball player playing tight end. So I like what he could potentially do in the NFL if he continues to develop, and he showed enough at Cincy. So that's my sleeper.
That's a solid list, and I like Weiler as your sleeper. So mine, similar list to Mark. So one, Kincaid is my number 1. I think he's the most complete looking tight end. Like you said, I know it's kind of between him and Michael Mayer. I just think he's got better hands, and I think they're probably about the same blocking. But then number 2 for me is Darnell Washington. And here's the thing, right? He is probably the best size advantage in this draft. But then also he is great catching in contested situations, at least all of this last season he was. So he really is that guy that you're getting where it's like you're getting an offensive lineman that also can go out and run routes and catch passes.
I mean, we've seen him block, dude, because a lot of time at Georgia, he was when they would do their 12 personnel and they had 2 tight ends on the field, him and Bowers, right? He was the blocking guy and Bowers the primary play action guy.
So then you get in that situation, and to me, it's like, you're getting, and his name was just with me a second ago, Vegas's old tight end that just went to the Giants. Waller. You're getting Waller, who's a little bit better of a blocker, in my opinion, even. So that's a fair draft comp right there, is Darren Waller. I think he could be put up there with like the Gronkowski and Kittle level of play. Like he could be that good. Like it's very fair to say that. I think your safest draft pick is Michael Mayer, in my opinion. Like if you're just trying to go get a dude,
that's why everyone's got him at the he ran a little bit of a slower time, but
doesn't have the highest ceiling, I think, in my opinion, but he's got a high floor. So My sleeper is Zach Kuntz. So I think the reason why he's a sleeper is because of the fact he played at Old Dominion. He originally played at Penn State, and he transferred to Old Dominion. He is 6'8", and that's why he's my sleeper, right? At the very least, you're going to get a guy who likes to block and can do that job for you. He definitely is a little rough around the edges when it comes to routes and catching. He's not as refined as Washington is, but I think he can get there. He's my sleeper. And then my overrated guy, in my opinion, is actually Sam Laporta. I don't think he's he's not going to be a bust by any means, but to me, it's like you are getting just essentially that, oh, he's an Iowa tight end. He's the Iowa tight end for this draft. And I think that kind of has bolstered his stock a little bit. Everything that I've seen on tape from him, from even a blocking standpoint, I really just think like there's a little bit more to be desired there. I think he'll be fine, but overall, I would go for these other 4 guys over him potentially. Maybe not Kuntz as my sleeper, but like that's a guy you might want to take if you miss out on these guys. So that's
fair. It's fair. A lot of people look at that and say, "Oh, another Iowa guy? No way," But hey, it's similar to how Ohio State's put out all these receivers and stuff like that. There's a reason that they're going. There's a brand to it, man, and it's because the development and coaching there is helping those guys get to where they want to go, and it translates to the NFL. A lot of schools, sometimes it doesn't translate to the professional, right? They could be really good college players, like Ohio State quarterbacks, for example, do not have a good history of once they get to the NFL producing, right? You could say that about Michigan quarterbacks too, aside from Tom Brady. So, want to get into our running backs? Do you want me to take the running backs first, or do you want to take the running backs?
Well, just to be fair, I'll take running backs first. That's cool with you. So, number 1, surprise, Bijan Robinson. I think he's the best. He's the best running back in the past 3 or 4 draft classes. Right? He's can break tackles. He's incredibly fast. He can catch. Like he's 100%.
Saquon Barkley compares.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's absolutely fair. Second, you got Gibbs. I don't know if I want to say he's not as versatile as Bijan, but that's kind of where
very different player.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's more like a ground and pound kind of guy, right? And he's good at that job. And then 3, and look, I'm going to be honest here. Like I have a couple strong opinions about running back and a couple not so strong opinions. 3, I put Spears. And frankly, I put him there because of the fact that PFF had him ranked pretty high, and I watched some of his film and didn't see any red flags. So that's why I put him there. To me, my sleeper is Tank Bigsby. I've been talking about Tank Bigsby for months on this podcast. And look, he's my sleeper because of his name. I just can't see a guy being named Tank Bigsby being a bust in the NFL. I just can't see it. And then my overhyped guy is, I'm hopefully pronouncing his name, Roschon Johnson, and I think his draft stock is bolstered because of the fact that he plays with Robinson, and I think that's why he might be a little overhyped. I think I saw him as like running back number 4 or 5 on the board. I don't think he's bad. I just think also like you're going to get a lot more looks at the NFL level if you're playing behind or with, probably the best running back in the past 3 or 4 draft classes. So that's my list.
All right. That's not bad. My list is going to be quite contradictory to yours. Okay. So
I'm excited.
Robinson is my top running back. So that's the only spot that we kind of agree. I do think it's fair to compare him to Saquon Barkley. I think he has the potential to be that level player. If you watch the film, some of his runs at his size, the ability for him to side cut, his jump cuts, like he's explosive as hell, man. Like he's a top 10 player in this year's draft. I don't think he'll go top 10 because running back value has just become kind of a joke in the NFL. They're just not durable enough to draft him that high, but he's that good. Gibbs, I think you could actually argue will be a better NFL running back than him because of the fact that he has more of a pass catching ability. He becomes almost like another receiving weapon out of the backfield, which is really tough for linebackers to cover. He showed that all over the place at Alabama. His draft comp would be like Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey. Okay, that kind of player that is like a hybrid running back slot. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that's. I think he's got that chance. That he's got a chance to be like Deebo Samuel too if he gets a little bit bigger. In terms of how they use him, I have. I don't know if I'm saying this right. I watched him play several times from Texas A&M. Devin Caney. Probably not saying that right, but hell of a player. Similar to Jahmyr Gibbs, playmaking guy, crazy speed, crazy change of direction, can catch the ball in the backfield. Third down, he's a 3-down back, right? Those are the toughest things to find in the NFL right now. Same comparison as Jahmyr Gibbs to like a Kamara, to that kind of guy who can catch the ball in the backfield, but can still be in on first and second down. Not afraid to block either, which is a huge thing. All three of these guys not afraid to block. My sleeper is Cameron Peoples out of App State. This dude runs probably the hardest of anyone in this draft in terms of the running backs. You watch him play in like the Senior Bowl. You watch him play at App State on his film. This dude will not go down on first contact. He will fight for the extra 2-3 yards every single snap, not afraid to block, and he can catch the ball in the backfield. So he was fun to watch. He was a part of a really electric App State offense that was upsetting some really good teams. And then my overrated player, which is very ironic because he was your underrated player, is Tank Bigsby.
Mark,
your reason was his name. Exactly why he's overrated. Listen, Tank Bigsby is a good college player. Okay. He's highly touted out of high school. Everyone's known him because of his name. He didn't have crazy production in college. Okay. I don't think he lived up to the hype that he had coming out of high school. And I just don't think he's an every down back. I think he's kind of going to be a first down, second down back. I don't know how good he is at catching the ball in the backfield compared to these other guys. I don't know how willing he is to block. Like, he's going to be probably a third round pick and maybe higher than that. But I don't know. I think he's overrated. Some people have him going, way higher. You want the Lions to take him. I do not. So he's my overrated running back.
Yeah, we'll see how this ages for sure. And honestly, I think there's other prospects I'd rather see the Lions take if we are going to take a running back. But look,
there's plenty of better options, man.
I can tell you one thing for sure. His production is probably going to, honestly, he reminds me more of a Jamal Williams that has a little bit more catching ability from what I've seen. But also, he's just a Dan Campbell guy. His name's Tank Bigsby. He's got to be a Dan Campbell guy. So that's what informs that for me.
Tank Bigsby, cool name. That's about it. That's all you're getting out of me. And he's a good player, but I'm not gonna put him up there with the guys that we just listed. I just can't. I don't think he's the same player.
All right, take it away with wide receiver, Mark. This is your position.
I'm gonna light it up here with the wide receivers. Love receivers. Feel pretty confident scouting wide receivers. I played wide receiver. I've studied this position for my entire life. Okay. And when it comes to the translation from college to NFL, it's pretty damn clear. Okay, it's not always teams miss receivers all the time, and it's because they look at the wrong things, right? In this year's draft, you have not as good as some of the last years we've seen, but a very good receiving draft here. And the main point I want to have about the receivers in this draft is there's a top dog in this year's draft that a lot of people are actually debating who is the top dog, but there's a clear top dog, and it's not close. It's JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Ohio State.
I agree.
And I will explain here why. Okay, it's not close. He's one, and then there's ... and then there's two. Okay, there is no one close to him, and here's why. He missed this year due to injury. Okay, and a lot of people are bashing him for it. He did want to play. He came back and tried to play several times in practice. Even tried to come back and play in a game. Hamstring injury. Very hard to play through. I've had it. Very weird injury. You feel like you're good. All of a sudden you're not good, right? The second you push it. So it's very hard to predict when you can come back. So everyone, Ohio State fans probably salty that he never came back, because he would have made a huge difference for them. I think it's hurting his draft stock a little bit. Let's think, I don't know, not too long ago, the last guy that did that, his name was Jamar Chase, who didn't play due to COVID, chose to sat out, didn't want to risk his injury. His draft stock got hit a little bit. Bengals took him. I think it's working out just fine for him and Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. So let's not forget that wasn't too long ago. So let that negative about JSN out the window. If you watch this guy's film, if you literally just watch one game, look up his highlights from the Rose Bowl. Dude put up 350 yards receiving in one game. You will not see a better individual wide receiver performance in college football ever. I mean, 3 touchdowns, okay, almost had a 4th one. He fumbled on the 1-yard line going in. You watch him run the ball. If you play a man-to-man, he's quick enough, he's fast enough where he'll beat you, right? He can run any route. He can attack you vertically. He can spread the defense out over the top. He can make you scared that he's going to beat you like Tyreek Hill. He can run underneath routes like Adam Thielen and Jefferson and Stephon Diggs, all those guys. He has everything. You ask Brian Hartline, who's kind of considered the engineer of the receiver factory coming out of Ohio State. He was on Bussin' with the Boys podcast literally last week, and he was asked top 3 receivers you've coached, right? He had Marvin Harrison Jr. as his number 1 overall prospect, okay, which is crazy because he's not even draft eligible. Right. And then his number 2, JSN, ahead of Garrett Wilson, who just had a Offensive Rookie of the Year season, and then ahead of Terry McLaurin, who's a Pro Bowler with the Commanders, and ahead of Olave. You know what I mean?
And Olave and Wilson both say that JSN's better than that.
Both,
too. Mark
both two guys that played with him said, okay, he's better than us, right? What else do you need to hear to prove that this is the best receiver in this year's draft? He would have been the first receiver taken in last year's draft if he was eligible.
I agree.
Even close. And then, so he's a top guy. I told John this. I think I've been watching his film, so if you can't tell, I've been watching his film and breaking it down. I think he's the best player in this year's draft, period. Who I would have as my second best player. Had a Jalen Carter, had a Stroud and Young.
How high do you think he goes? Top 10?
Yeah. I think the latest he goes, to be honest with you, John, is the Bears at 9.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's the latest he goes. I think that I could see several teams taking him in those first 10 picks. I could see people trading up to get him.
Yeah,
he's a generational talent. So you have him, and then obviously ... Your next guys, which nothing against them. It's just JSN's that good. I like Jordan Addison a lot out of USC. Okay, he was the Pitt transfer. He played with Kenny Pickett, had a Biletnikoff year with Pitt. Came to USC, played in Lincoln Riley's system with Caleb Williams. Doesn't hurt to play for Pickett and Caleb Williams as your 2 quarterbacks. He knew it all. Checks every box, has the speed, has the change of direction, can run the routes, great hands, has the size. Would not have any problem with any team that picks him. I have 3rd overall Quentin Johnson. Now, there's going to be questions then, right? His draft comp to me and what he could be is like T. Higgins. Okay, that's what I see him as. I don't know if he'd be like a true receiver 1, right? Because I mean, T. Higgins, he's like a receiver 1B right behind Jamar Chase. But you have him in the right system with another receiver opposite of him. He's a mismatch. He's a nightmare, right? Because who do you put on him? Do you put safety over the top to help? Do you have smaller corners guard him? Do you have your longer, taller corner try to follow him around? Because he's got the speed to change the game over the top, but he's also got the size to just be an absolute red zone nightmare, and he can block. So I like that for the fact that he brings lots to the table. My overrated player is Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. I think that he has the speed and the deep threat ability you want on your team, but his underneath game, which you want to have that to complement that speed, is average, slightly above average. Not a bad prospect. A lot of people have him even in the conversation as like the top receiver in the draft. I don't think he's close to these other guys I've named. And then my sleeper is out of Michigan State, Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed started at Western Michigan, so I saw him play in the MAC. Transferred because he had such a great true freshman year. Had to sit out a year because this was before the portal rules to Michigan State. And ever since he was able to play at Michigan State, he was their best player on the team. Right. And he's got special teams to go with it, right? He's got big playability as a punt returner, kick returner. That's always anything you can do to separate yourself.
Because of the fact that MSU was garbage, I think, as a team this year. I agree with
you. I think he raised his stock back up, though, John. You're right. He had a great. I think he won MVP at the Senior Bowl. He had great week of practice. I don't think he lost a one-on-one rep all week. Had an awesome Senior Bowl game. Did well at the combine. He checks every box for me. He's slightly undersized, but his comparison, honestly, is what he could be is like an Antonio Brown. That's kind of what I see him. Undersized, can line up in the slot, can be cheap, can run, has great hands, has great neutral ball ability. Right, any ball that is thrown to him, he's covered, is like a 70-30 chance he'll come down with it somehow. And that having that at his size changes your draft process. Not to mention he can return punts like AB. So that's why I have that. Go ahead, take over I want to hear your see how it compares.
Alert, my 1 2 are the same, right? I think JSN's probably not probably. He's definitely the best receiver prospect in this draft. I don't think it's particularly close. Obviously, him not being around this past year kind of hurt his stock a little bit, but I don't think that should matter in the grand scheme of things. I truly think he is a very generational wide receiver talent, wide receiver one, wherever he goes, for sure. Addison, I haven't seen a ton of his tape, but I kind of right there with you. He's obviously, the number one guy catching passes from Caleb Williams. That's usually going to make you look pretty good. I think he has all the physical tools to make it happen.
When you could be the top guy at 2 schools in 2 years, I mean, clearly you're a part of the solution.
Right.
So
a guy that you didn't mention, which I'm actually surprised because I think you'd be pretty impressed if you watch this tape, was Zay Flowers. He's coming out of a small school, so obviously that, it leaves a couple question marks, but the dude runs super clean routes, has great hands. I think he is.
I like Zay Flowers.
Yeah, he's going to be a solid NFL player, in my opinion. Overhyped in the sense that I don't think he's actually a first-round draft pick is for me Quentin Johnson. And the reason why is because of the fact that I think he's great in contested catch situations, and his yards after the catch is pretty killer as well. I think his speed isn't anything to write home about. His route running isn't anything to write home about. And I forgot who you even compared earlier.
T. Higgins.
Yeah, I don't know if it's totally there personally. I think his size is really helpful to his draft stock because of the fact that it's a matchup nightmare wherever you go. I'm just not sure if he has all of the tools to actually get the job done. We will see. I'm not trying to say again that this dude's going to be a bust. I just don't think he's going to be a top 20 pick, which I see him projected to be a top 20 pick all of the freaking time. He's actually.
You might still be solid at what he did to Michigan.
Yeah, that's fair too. My sleeper is A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest, which to me, this is a dude that if you miss on Quentin Johnston, but you want similar physical tools and pretty similar attributes as a wide receiver overall, this is the guy you should look for in the later rounds. I think
he might be a better overall player than Quentin Johnson.
Yeah, I think everything's there for it. So it's, again, not as big of a school, obviously, wasn't in the playoffs, things like that, probably hurt his stock. He's 6'5". He's got good hands. He's got this very similar speed. I
probably
think,
slightly better route runner.
Yeah, so I think if he's there, in the 3rd round or wherever he's going to end up being, I think he's a solid pick if you missed out on kind of that big body tight end or big body receiver that you were hoping to get. So that's why I have him there. And then moving on to quarterbacks, this one's tough, obviously, because there's only a handful every single year that, there's conversation around usually. So me and Mark, I'm actually pretty sure it's the same. So I guess we can just kind of talk through these guys one by one if you want. Number one for both Mark and I is Bryce Young. Yes, he's undersized, but I think he's the most NFL-ready quarterback from a mental coaching standpoint. I think this is a dude that you'll be able to plug in, and he will be taking starting NFL reps pretty early on. I don't think there's a whole lot of sitting on the bench, developing behind somebody else that's going to need to happen with Bryce Young. And frankly, wherever he goes, either Carolina or Texans, he's not really going to have that option anyways. There's not really
when it comes down to pressure and performing under pressure and big games and big moments, I don't think you can even compare Stroud and Young. Bryce Young in big moments and big games. Even, in some of the games that he lost too, okay, some of the national championship game against Georgia, he still performed very, very well, okay? And in some of the rivalry games that we saw C.J. Stroud play, Michigan twice in his last 2 times against Michigan, he kind of choked. Stroud played really well against Georgia in the semifinal this year, good enough to beat him, which is impressive enough, but there was just too many times in Stroud's career where he had the opportunity to take everything he ever wanted. And he did. And Bryce Young, I just think performed better in big moments, right? And I think he's more mentally ready, like you said. He gives me Drew Brees vibes. Very accurate passer, undersized, perfect form, coachable, humble, quiet, good leader, just does his job, right? And C.J. Stroud kind of different comparison, right? But that's why I have Bryce Young ahead of him. But Stroud's not a bad player.
No, and I've heard a lot of Stroud comparisons to Jared Goff, and I actually, like that because, I mean, he's just this tall dude. Yeah. Prefers the pocket pass. He's not going to be this,
he's
super
an accurate thrower.
Exactly, accurate thrower. He's not going to be this athletic freak that puts the entire team on his back, but he's going to get the freaking job done. And I think that's actually a very,
fair.
solid
That's a fair comparison. And to be fair too, and we've said this before, those are really the only two guys I genuinely think make it in the NFL, okay, as potential starters that last around the league, that are names that we continue to talk about for years to come. The rest of these guys, I think, are going to be forgotten about.
Well, this next guy that we're going to mention here, he's going to make it in a different way. I think this dude's going to be a solid second string quarterback for a long time, in my opinion. Like, he kind of gives me like Geno Smith vibes in that sense, where is he going to be a starter? Probably not. But is he going to be a really solid second option for whoever's team, and why I think the Lions should probably take him? Yes. And that guy's Hendon Hooker. Look, his physical attributes are great. He seems to be a really humble, solid guy. He definitely was showing, I'd say, NFL decision making when he was there with Tennessee, and his hands are freaking huge, and he can freaking sling it. So that's kind of where I'm at with him. Honestly, I get Richardson as being this athletic freak prospect. If that's why you're high on Richardson, why are people not also high on Hendon Hooker for, kind of similar reasons, in my opinion? I think these guys should kind of be talked hand in hand, and I think Hooker's honestly a more developed quarterback than him. So
I agree with you on part of that. I disagree on part of it. I think Hendon Hooker is the better prospect. I think he'll be a good backup quarterback in the NFL. I think he has a way better mental preparation for the NFL than Anthony Richardson does, which is why I think it knocks on Anthony Richardson a lot there. He's so young. He's still so raw, and you just don't know if he's going to develop. It's not easy to learn how to play quarterback, especially when you're trying to do it against the best athletes in the world. Okay, it's one thing to develop a guy for 4 years in college. To try to put him in the NFL and just say, oh, he'll figure it out. No, a lot of guys don't figure it out, okay, because it's not easy to do. And then what you said about kind of comparing their athleticism, I think Richardson's much more athletic than Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker's athletic, but I don't think you can put him in the same conversation as Richardson. I think the guy you should be comparing Richardson to in terms of athleticism, which I don't know why people aren't, is Will Levis. And Will Levis, not as athletic as Richardson, but he's the closest guy in the draft to him in terms of athleticism. He's got the big arm. He can throw from weird angles. He's got the Josh Allen, can throw it out of the stadium type of throw. But a lot of interceptions, a lot of missed throws, right, where he's overthrowing people. But he can run the ball similar to Richardson, and I don't know why those two aren't compared more. I think Levis is probably actually a better prospect just because he's played more games. He's shown more good things on film. Richardson probably has a higher upside than Levis. Doesn't matter to me, and both those guys are my overrated. And
I think both of these guys are going to be interception machines in the NFL.
I don't think either of these guys last longer than 3-4 seasons.
I think
really don't.
Punts. I think both these guys are going to be oh shit, I'm struggling right now. I'm just going to start lobbing shit down the field.
What did we learn? What did we learn with Zach Wilson's pro day?
This dude's got a cannon of an arm. He's nuts. He can throw it downfield.
He can throw when his hips are left. He can throw it 60 yards right. He can throw it from the right hash to the left, numbers. All this cute stuff that looks great, right? That somehow gets you to be able to, have a little fun night with your best buddy's mom, right? All the stuff that is really cool. Will Levis and Anthony Richardson do the same crap? Doesn't translate to the NFL, man. Doesn't translate to winning football games, to being a productive quarterback in the NFL. The only two guys that have that this year, unfortunately, Bryce Young, Stroud. And my underrated. Who's yours? Yeah.
Mine was going to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who's UCLA.
You're high on this guy. Can you explain to me why?
I mean, so obviously, he's not this big, massive athletic freak that the people are looking for in, Hooker, Levis, Richardson, and stuff like that. I just think same thing, right? I'm not saying that this dude's going to be a starter. I'm saying that this dude's going to be a reliable second-string quarterback. I watched some of his tape. I forgot who started talking about him a bunch. Might have been Brett Coleman at one point. I'm a big fan of Brett Coleman's channel, especially his draft prospecting is some of the best on YouTube, in my opinion. And he got pretty high in him. I started watching some of his film. I'm yeah, I can see it. This is a guy that, I could see Seahawks, bringing on to develop under Geno if they can grab him in the second or third round or something like that, right? Like those kind of situations. So anyways, who's your sleeper?
Max Duggan. And it's one of those things with Max Duggan where you cannot measure what he accomplished at TCU overcome. And it's just, you have someone that hungry that's shown what that hunger can do. Not to mention he has the ability to run the ball. He ran a 4.5 40 at the combine. He's sneaky athletic, great leader, was a Heisman finalist, put up record-breaking numbers at TCU. Max Duggan is being forgotten about. And, I think it's messed up. I think that he should be drafted. There's talks that he may not even be drafted.
Oh, I hope he gets drafted. I think he's definitely a
him and Stetson Bennett are kind of in that. Yeah, I agree, but you know how it gets, man.
Oh, and Duggan has a lot more upside, just I think from a physical attribute standpoint than Bennett does. And look, yeah. I think Bennett's going to be an okay second string quarterback. He's going to have an okay career as a second string quarterback. I really do. So yeah, we'll see.
So those are the other two guys, but Max Duggan, yeah, I'm high on Max Duggan. I'd like to see him get a chance to be a backup quarterback. I'd like to see him get drafted to the right team. He's a guy that people are sleeping on. And I think he's better than people are giving him credit. The fact that Anthony Richardson is getting all this talk and Max Duggan's getting essentially none, I think that's messed up, dude. Look what he just did last year compared to what Richardson did.
Right. No, I completely agree with you. So, and I think, winning's an important thing to look at with quarterbacks.
It's the most important thing.
They can take it into their own hands at the college level, and there's not a whole lot of positions that can say that.
Championship game at TCU, man. You know what I mean? He beat a very good Michigan team. He willed us that team all the way there.
You're right. He's not being talked about enough. So no. I completely agree with you. So yeah, look, that wraps it up for this episode. We're going to do pretty much a similar format next week with defensive prospects. And then probably the week after that, we're going to do at least one mock draft, maybe a couple, right? I think mock drafts are a lot of fun. Obviously, you're seeing more and more of them. And as we get closer to the draft, I think everybody kind of has a better idea of, where the dominoes are going to fall. So we appreciate everybody tuning in. This was a blast, Mark, and I'm excited to see how horrible some of these takes age and, how good some of them age. So
I feel pretty good about these ones, man. I feel pretty good. We'll have to see. That's the beauty of the draft, man, is you can either miss and it can set your franchise back 10 years, or you can hit and you can be like the Packers and have two quarterbacks in a 40-year span.
Yep. Or, where Aaron Rodgers is going right now to the Jets, who looked locked and loaded because of pretty much their rookie class alone. From last year. They hit so hard that they're an entirely different franchise. So, yeah, super cool stuff. We will catch you guys next time. Peace.
Peace out.